I can make this chat disappear on the right-hand side.
Yeah, hide panel.
Let's see. Might be because I'm partial screening here.
What's up, Cougar Nation, and welcome again aboard the Hype Train podcast. I'm your host, Joe Wheat. That's at JoeWheat27 on Twitter. As always, with my boy, Trevor Levitt. And today we have a new guest, Casey Lundquist, senior editor at Cougs on SI. Casey, you want to introduce yourself to the people?
Absolutely. What's up, guys? It's an honor to be here with you fine gentlemen. I'm Casey. Hopefully you've seen one of my articles surfacing on the internet. I write on the BYU page on SI. Been doing it since 2020, which is kind of crazy to think about. But it's some people might not know that's kind of my part-time gig on the side. Full-time, I work in finance, so I'm a nerd, and I do like to incorporate that in some of the stuff that I write about. So excited to get into everything we have going on this week. I don't think there's a better time to be recording a podcast than, BYU is about to take on a top 10 Texas Tech team, ranked in the top 10, and we got the first college football playoff ranking. So excited to get into it.
Yeah, we picked a pretty good time to start recording a podcast on BYU. I think the first year we started doing this, if you guys are new, we're going live on YouTube for the first time. So that's exciting. So welcome to anyone who's new listening to the show. Please like, subscribe, do all the things. We are presented, as always, by Wilner O'Reilly Immigration Law. We picked a really good time to start something called the Hype Train podcast because things have pretty much been up since we started this thing back in 2021. I don't like.
Before we go any further, Joe, I just feel like Casey didn't quite introduce himself as well as he needed to. He's a humble guy. If Casey Lundquist sounds familiar, it's probably because Casey has been the oasis in the very dry desert that is spring camp and spring ball. He provides every highlight analysis. He was the one that kept most of us updated on like Bear Bachmeier's status after Jake Retzloff left. One of my heroes, honestly, as far as BYU sports goes. So Casey, we're really excited to have you here.
Well, the pleasure's all mine. I'm excited to be on with you guys.
Love it. Also love seeing people in the live chat. Carter Anderson, Parker Meacham. Forgive me if I pronounced that wrong. Thank you guys both for listening to the podcast since day one. It still blows my mind that anyone listens besides my mom, but here we are. Look, there was a basketball game last night, and all love to you, BYU basketball. Great win. Stoked to see you on the floor. AJ DeBounce, you're a stud. Richie Saunders, you're a stud. We're not really going to have time for you guys tonight, and that's okay. Like we got all of January, February, March to kind of talk BYU basketball. There's an undefeated football team on campus, and that undefeated football team finds itself in the top 10 of the college football playoff rankings. BYU finds its way at number 7, joined by fellow Big 12 members, Texas Tech at 8, and Utah at 13. Your top 5 is Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, followed by Ole Miss, BYU, Tech, Oregon, and Notre Dame. Wanted to get your guys' kind of initial reaction to the rankings as a whole, and then kind of what that means for BYU in particular.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start and take the low-hanging fruit. I was shocked at how much respect this committee gave the Big 12. It seemed like after last year, it was going to be a foregone conclusion that all these Big 12 teams were going to be undervalued, despite the conference's strong record against the ACC and kind of the similar levels those two conferences are on. But to my surprise, the committee values the Big 12 much more highly than the ACC. You've got 3 Big 12 teams ahead of the highest-ranked ACC team, including a 2-loss Utah team, which has no ranked wins, just has 2 losses to 2 really good teams. And because Utah has looked so good in their wins, They're ahead of number 14, Virginia, which is really noteworthy to me because it sets up everyone in the league this year to potentially get 2 or even 3 teams in. And it's also a little bit of it's a floor for BYU, whereas if they lose a game, they're not dropping further than wherever Utah is in the rankings. And that's kind of an insurance policy when you're heading into a really tough November stretch.
I think that's exactly like, that was my first takeaway when they release the rankings one by one and we get to fifth, like we get to around 17. I'm thinking, okay, where is this committee really going to slot the Big 12 this year? It's all going to depend on where Utah is. 17 came and went, 16, 15, 14. And like, sure enough, Utah's sitting there at 13. And while that's going to drive pretty much everyone listening to this podcast nuts because we want nothing good to happen to the Utah football program, it really is a great thing for BYU because, to Casey's point, it does set that floor of if BYU does lose to Texas Tech this weekend, or if Texas Tech loses to BYU, neither team is falling below 13th in the rankings because both have that head-to-head win over Utah with either a identical record or a better record in BYU's case. So I think that's great news. It at this point, like, Utah's probably going to win out. Again, that's not everyone's favorite thing to hear on this show. But again, like, because Utah's probably going to win out, I think it pretty much is a lock that the Big 12 is going to get 2 teams in if at least one of Texas Tech and BYU take care of business.
Yeah, and I think what's nice too, you talked about respect, Casey, is that the Big 12 was finally given the all-powerful quality losses for Utah to be able to sit there at 13, which is nice. That's something that we've joked about with the Big 10 and the SEC for a while, and now here the Big 12 has it, and not complaining. It's nice to kind of be a part of that group. But for me, the first thing I saw, obviously, with BYU being 7th, just finally, like, BYU's getting viewed the way that I view them, right? But just by national pundits and playoff committee. And it was nice to see them recognized for that. And, Casey, obviously you mentioned the floor of Utah and having that kind of be an insurance policy. Likewise, in the same way, this game being set up on Saturday between a 7th and an 8th is kind of an insurance policy, even in its own, because one, you've shown that you care enough about quality losses that Utah is where they are, but now whoever walks away with a loss on Saturday has a quality loss to the other, and really shouldn't fall that far. So it adds a lot more intrigue to Saturday, but it also, in a way, adds a little bit of I'd almost say relief. I think that was the word that I walked away with from this particular selection show, was just the fact that the Big 12 has caught people's attention. It's a competitive league with a lot of parity, but they also recognize that the cream at the top is competitive and can be competitive with anyone in the country. And so it was, especially for an opening playoff committee choice, I thought it was near perfect.
So this is going to speak to Casey and mine's favorite thing, which is data and spreadsheets. One of the new things that came out this year with the College Football Playoff Committee is the introduction of metrics in the selection process. This is something I've always felt like college basketball gets right, where every year I'll put out my Wackatology rankings kind of around the beginning of March for college basketball, where there's a very, basically someone as dumb as me can put together a very rudimentary metric that roughly stacks up to what the committee does, which basically says that the committee's selection process in college basketball is really easy to follow. It's very similar, like that's always been the issue with college football, in my opinion, is the lack of transparency in that selection process. But I think with the committee's, with the announcement that the committee is using strength of record and strength of schedule metrics now, but also seeing where this particular playoff ranking ended up, it gives me a lot more hope that going forward, the Big 12 is going to continue to get a lot more respect. In some ways, it's a little bit sad Because had they used these strength of record metrics a year earlier, BYU probably would have found its way into the playoff, if not in the playoff discussion. BYU finished last year with the 7th strongest record in the country, but finished 17th in the final rankings. But this year, on average, if you combine the public strength of record rankings that we have, BYU was ranked 5th on average, Texas Tech was ranked 9th on average, and Utah was ranked 16th on average. And so what that tells me is, based on the metrics, the Big 12 deserved to have 3 teams that were in the playoff discussion. And the rankings very closely mirrored that. The strength of record rankings also had Oregon below BYU and Ole Miss. That's where we found them. And tied with Texas Tech, Oregon found themselves behind all 3 of those teams. Notre Dame was at 11 in average strength of record to Miami's 15th. That was kind of a controversial thing to see Miami behind Notre Dame despite that head-to-head win. But really, what stood out to me is that I think these rankings are going to be a little bit more predictable because of those strength of record metrics that they're using.
I like with it too, though. You have the metrics in there, but at least with Notre Dame and Miami, yes, you have the head-to-head, but the thing that have changed is obviously there's a change in the way both teams are playing as opposed to when they played at the beginning of the season, which I kind of like, right? You take the stats, you take the whole story of the season, and you throw the head-to-head in there if it's close. It's one of the reasons why Utah has benefited so much, is because they've, especially after their loss to Texas Tech and BYU, they've rebounded quite nicely and are just absolutely throttling teams. So it's nice to know that there is kind of ways to kind of adapt and change some things. Obviously, head-to-head matters, and clearly in this case, they took the rankings, they looked at kind of when in the season everything occurred, and then they just kind of went from there. So it's not, the eggs aren't all in one basket. These rankings are being placed, based off of a myriad of different things, and that I think has changed a lot of, from polls in the past.
Yeah, I was gonna just a few things that came to mind as you guys were talking about this. We were talking about floors and how Utah gives BYU a floor. I also wonder if Notre Dame at 10 might create a floor for BYU as well, since they have 2 losses and BYU has the better win, being over number 13 Utah. I do wonder if BYU were to drop 1 to Texas Tech, if they wouldn't stay ahead of Notre Dame, given that they only have 1 loss. And then number 2, I think it helped the Big 12 this year that the teams that were expected to be good have been good. Texas Tech and Utah were picked towards the top of the league. They performed well. BYU would have been picked towards the top of the league if not for the Jake Retzloff situation. And I think once people saw Bear Bachmeier play, they said, okay, if BYU gets that level of quarterback play, they can be just as good or better than they were last year. So I think that's helped the league. However, how we were just talking about how this committee has kind of set the precedent to ignore head-to-head wins. We talked about how Utah is the floor if BYU drops 1 game. I'm not sure they're the floor if BYU drops 2. For that same reason, they could use the trajectory/eye test argument to drop BYU completely out of the picture. And I think that's probably fair. I don't know if BYU goes 2-2 the rest of the way that they would be playing at a playoff caliber level, but it's something to keep in mind if BYU especially loses to Texas Tech on Saturday.
It's interesting you bring that up. One of our chatters, David Wortham, actually pointed that out as well, and I think that is where things get a little bit scary. But I mean, we'll talk about it moving forward. But I think BYU is playing at a level where 2 losses at this point would be a surprise, in my opinion.
And to your point, Casey, I think next week's rankings are going to be as instructive as this week's, because if BYU doesn't pull off the win against Texas Tech, if they fall below, if they stay above Notre Dame, then it makes me think, okay, they're gonna get a little bit more cushion. Thank you, Malcolm, coworker, saying I'm his favorite, which is surprising because he has to see me every day. If BYU stays above Notre Dame in the rankings, that's something that is encouraging that even if they do pick up that second loss, especially if Cincinnati finds its way into the rankings, that maybe BYU can stay ahead of Utah in that 10-2 conversation. But to be honest, like the way Utah's playing right now, and like they're just demolishing teams. And I think that that's to BYU's benefit because they're one of two teams that have looked in the same stratosphere as Utah this year. But I unfortunately, I agree that I'm not sure if BYU loses a second game, if that bodes well for BYU's playoff hopes. But to be honest, like part of the reason Miami is down where they are is that they lost 2 games in which they were like touchdown favorites, one at home and another on the road to SMU. BYU's probably going to be favored in their final 3 games. So even if Texas Tech does lose, like even if BYU does lose to Texas Tech this weekend, BYU is at least like a 60% favorite in every game the rest of the way. And so if BYU drops one of those, honestly, it especially 2 of them being at home, it's going to be tough to make an argument for BYU.
Yeah, I mean, 2 loss BYU, especially if one of them is to Cincy, conversation shifts, right? For you guys, I guess moving forward, was there anyone else on this list that you're kind of like, man, like they missed on this? I'm just thoroughly impressed with the community. I feel like they did a great job.
Like, look, Notre Dame fans are happy, which means I'm sad. I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway is like scrolling through Twitter and seeing Notre Dame fans pounding their chests in my mentions because I had a tweet about them earlier this week. I thought it was interesting that Vanderbilt with multiple ranked wins is behind Utah. This committee really likes Utah, which again is like to BYU's benefit. Like that isn't something that we should shy away from because we already have that win in the bag. But the fact that the Big 12, like a 2-loss Big 12 team is going to be ahead of a 2-loss SEC team, again, that shows that the committee really likes the Big 12, and whether that's because of these new metrics that we already talked about, or if Utah's eye test is just really, really good, it's good news for BYU. I'm happy to see Georgia Tech where they are. Georgia Tech, their strength of schedule is like somewhere in the 70s or 80s. That one, it always bothered me that they were ahead of BYU in the AP poll, but now that they've dropped a game, it's I think 8-17 is about right there. Committee really likes the Big Ten. A lot of teams ranked from that conference. I'm surprised the ACC got 5 teams in though. That Pittsburgh over Cincinnati was a surprise.
Yeah, I would agree. I was a little surprised to not see Cincy right around 25, especially since Tennessee got in with 3 losses and no quality wins. Pitt is a good poll as well. I mean, Pitt has 2 losses and they've lost to one of the worst Big 12 teams that there is, bottom 2 or bottom 3 team. So that was a bit surprising to me. I think one of the biggest winners from the rankings has to be Texas. Like it wasn't long ago that everybody had written Texas off, and now they're in the top 12. They're knocking on the door. And I will say, like if they went out, they're in, but they have a tough finish to the season. They have to play Texas A&M. And I think with how they looked earlier in the season, with one more loss, they'll be out of the picture. So they have a tough road ahead, but if you were cheering for Texas, you'd have to feel good given that just 2 weeks ago, you were viewed as well outside of the college football playoff picture.
Yeah.
Just anything to get Arch Manning in there.
that one's kind of infuriating. Just like Texas should have, 3 losses by now at least. And fortunately, I think they'll probably lose to Bama and Georgia. So honestly, at the end of the day, none of this is probably going to matter. My guess is that Oklahoma is also going to drop 1 or 2 more since they got to go to Bama as well. So again, like odds are like the Big 12, if one team in the top 10 takes a loss, like at least between that, like there's a real chance the Big 12 gets 3 teams in, which again, be it far from me to wish anything good for my brethren to the north. But I think it's great for the conference to get as many teams in this thing as the Big Ten, if it comes to that.
Yeah, I would expect Utah to be in the top 12 by this time next week because Texas has to go to Georgia, Oklahoma has to go to Alabama, and Oklahoma has ranked games against Alabama and Missouri, and then they finish off with LSU. That's a tough finish. Texas has to go to Georgia, host Arkansas, and then they host Texas A&M. I don't see how either of those teams finishes 3-0. Therefore, Utah just would need one more upset, and they're in. And to your point, then what we've been talking about, if Texas Tech and BYU are 11-1 each, the Big 12 is getting 3 teams in.
Yeah. I feel like we've kind of beat these rankings to death. Again, really surprised. It's always depressing when I kind of plan my night around just being angry and being a hater of the CFP committee. And so when they gave me something I actually enjoy, it kind of ruined my plans for tonight. So definitely welcome news for me. Random question before we start our Texas Tech preview. This would have been the week that Jake Retzloff would have come back from suspension had he stayed. If things played out the way that they did, who are you starting this week, Bear or Jake?
I mean, I don't know how you would turn away from Bear Bachmeier at this point in the season for so many reasons. But I think even if you ignored the weirdness that would be introducing a quarterback on an undefeated team with like 4 or 5 games left and how unprecedented that would be. But just objectively, Bear Bachmeier is better for this team today because of how he protects the football. In terms of turnover-worthy plays, not just through the air, but on the ground, Jake Retzloff had some of the most catastrophic turnovers in college football last year. And that's not an opinion. That's a like percentile based in terms of like how much you hurt your team's chances to win when you commit a turnover. Jake Retzloff was in the 4th or 5th percentile of quarterbacks last year. He really hurt BYU down the stretch. And Bear Bachmeier could do that too in a game. He's a freshman, but he hasn't done it, and we're 8 games in. And so I wouldn't see a scenario where you could go away from the freshman who has put your team on his back 3 or 4 times in 1 games, and he's getting better and better. His trajectory is up and to the right. And I don't know how you could turn away from that.
Yeah, my answer is obvious. I'm wearing it on my chest, and I'm saying it proudly. The thing is, though, is as obvious as we are as fans saying, like, oh, yeah, it's Bear Bachmeier, I don't think this is a discussion that's being had with the coaches either, based off of exactly what Casey just said. Like, Bear and Jake Retzloff's, like, what they've shown, like, their work out on the field is you're getting the same amount of like touchdown production from Bear as you did with Jake Retzloff without the anxiety that came with every time Jake Retzloff dropped back to throw the football. And you're getting it from a kid who's younger, has more eligibility, and frankly, I think has better leadership qualities. And I don't say any of this this isn't like a roast Jake Retzloff session as much as it is to just kind of point out how amazing Bear Bachmeier has been, although that's probably goes without saying at this point for everyone that's in here. But Bear Bachmeier has been everything you could possibly want out of a BYU quarterback, let alone somebody that came in, transferred from Stanford. We all know the story, obviously, and has been an incredible leader and has progressed so much week in and week out that when it rolls around to Saturday with the Iowa State game under his belt, with another bye week, with the game prep for Texas Tech, like I expect to see another step. Like I expect to see maybe another 2 steps, given he had 2 weeks to prepare for Bear. That's just kind of the expectation he set. Whereas most weeks for Jake, I was just like, man, this offense is so good and this defense is so good. I just really hope we don't hand the ball over, within our red zone to these teams. Man, I really hope we don't throw another end zone fade at the end of the season. I really hope that, Jake doesn't blow it, right. And so I don't think it's a discussion at this point.
And one more thing I'll add really quick. We had when the Jake Retzloff news kind of became final in July, Joe and I had actually gone back and looked at a few games and seen where a quarterback that replaces Jake Retzloff could improve versus 2024. There was one throw in particular that was an outlet pass to a wide open LJ Martin against Utah. That was a very simple throw that would have gone for 30 or 40 yards and changed the trajectory of that game because BYU ended up turning the ball over on downs a play or two later at midfield. And Jake whiffed on that throw. He just misfired. It was, 8 feet above LJ Martin's head. If you compare that to Bear Bachmeier making a simple layup type throw to Preston Rex against Utah in almost the exact same situation, and Preston Rex takes it for 30 or 40 yards, I think it's also that kind of making the layups that's added a layer of consistency to BYU's offense that lacked at times. Whereas they haven't always been great in the red zone, so it hasn't always translated to points. But BYU rarely goes 3 and out, and I think Bears' consistency to hit the layups is the main reason why versus last year, because BYU in 2024 was kind of a little bit of boom or bust. They would go 3 and out, put together a long scoring drive, but it was very inconsistent. BYU's consistently moved the chains even when they don't score this year. And I think Bear Bachmeier is the primary reason why. And it also helps that LJ Martin has been so great.
Well, what's been so interesting is even moving on from Jake, that the way Bear is moving the way Bear is playing right now is a lot more akin to even Jaron Hall in 2021, his first year as a starter. I'm not sure if you guys have seen those spiderweb charts that basically show how quarterbacks perform in a variety of different metrics. Bear is higher than Zach, Jaron, and Jake. Zach meaning Zach Wilson and Jaron Hall in success rate, which means down to down in terms of having successful plays moving the football. Bear Bachmeier is higher in that category than all the others. He's significantly higher in turnovers. In terms of taking care of the football, he's a lot higher. I think what's been so encouraging is his development as a passer. He has 10 big time throws to only 8 turnover worthy plays. So I wonder, and this will lead us into the Texas Tech discussion. How good do we think Bear Bachmeier actually is? Because a lot of people have kind of brought up the point that this is going to be the toughest environment that he's played in so far. He's a true freshman going up against a senior. We've heard that argument pretty much every single week this year, and Bear has outperformed every quarterback he's played against. But I wanted to kind of get your guys' feel is how, in terms of other quarterbacks nationally, let alone true freshmen, where does he stack up in your guys' mind?
I'm going to tell you, it depends on the playlist of songs that he's got in his mind to sing in case things go wrong. No, I'm just kidding. But Bear for me is in college football right now is a top 25 quarterback, and it continues to improve each and every week. BYU obviously is not in anywhere close to the CFP rankings without his play, and the fact that he continues to get better, I think for me is what allows me to go into this game in Lubbock with, I wouldn't say without fear. I'm obviously nervous, but with confidence to know that I don't believe that the environment is going to be too much for him. We've yet to see Iowa State was the worst possible start that you could have. They hit on a 1-play touchdown, crowds immediately into it. BYU responds right away and scores, but then the next drive they immediately go 3 and out. Every play is negative. It's going backwards, sack on first down, false starts galore. This kid has been put into so many unique situations, whether it's down 14 against Colorado or up 14 against Arizona, but then rain delay, and then Arizona rattles off a 21 0 run. Like Bear has seen everything this year, and the look in his eyes has not changed. There were times when last year, like against Kansas State, there was visible frustration and visible shock from Avery Johnson when things started to go wrong. And Avery Johnson's a good quarterback. Bear has yet to show any sort of frustration with his own players if they drop a pass or run the wrong route, or with himself when he has a turnover or makes the wrong read, or if a lineman misses a block. Like, you name it, anything that's gone wrong, Bear just stays completely level-headed, and it's a valuable trait. I talked about this like extensively at the beginning of the season. Like, you can kind of tell that like his dad was a Marine. Like, he just kind of has that edge that no matter like when crap inevitably hits the fan, you're just going to get back up and you're just going to kind of just keep moving forward. And it shows, like, physically in his play where he's dragging 8 guys into the end zone against Utah, or mentally where he's responding to the worst situations possible in a game and is making the most of it and is leading BYU to this 8-0 start.
Yeah, in response to your question, Joe, I would say for BYU's play style this season, it's hard to find a better fit than Bear Bachmeier, because we've seen offenses get the better of BYU's defense for a half, but it's very hard to get the better of BYU's defense for 2 halves in a row. And therefore, it's really hard to score more than 20 to 24 points against BYU's defense. So with that in mind, BYU plays so many close games. It's just in their DNA. It's in the way that they have decided to go about this season when they learned that they were going to have a true freshman quarterback. And you have a quarterback now who has as many fourth quarter or second half comebacks as any other quarterback in the country. It's hard to bet against Bear Bachmeier if it's a 1 possession game and he has the ball in his hands. He's just proven that he can go out and play really well. So I think there are quarterbacks in college football with a little more arm talent and maybe the upside that are higher than Bear Bachmeier. But for BYU style this season, he's a perfect fit, and I think he's a top 20 quarterback in college football right now.
Yeah, like QBR isn't my favorite metric in the world, but it takes into account the whole picture of a quarterback, including passing and rushing. Bear is 18th in the country in QBR, ahead of like a top 5 Heisman contender in Marcel Reed from Texas A&M. He's like, as of last week, he had more touchdowns than Julian Sayin. He Heisman contender at Ohio State. More yards per game than Diego Pavia. Like, Bear is playing at such a high level for any quarterback, let alone a true freshman, that it just feels different than it did last year because of the quarterback play. Like, I remember when the rankings came out last year, BYU found its spot at 6th, and BYU deserved it. Like, their resume certainly was worthy of a top 6 ranking. But it always just like felt in the back of my head that something was going to go wrong in the month of November, and lo and behold, it did. And some of that was on the quarterback play, which is why we spent so much time talking about Jake, even though he's not here. Like, that's the key difference between this year and last year. The defense is just as strong as it was last year. The offense, in terms of talent, is equal to what it was last year. The real question is can BYU get better quarterback play down the stretch? And Bear Bachmeier is a quarterback that is not only getting better every week, but gets better against the best defenses that he plays. Like, BYU's played 4 top 50 defenses in FPI efficiency, and Bear is averaging over 300 total yards per game on those defenses. This is a kid that doesn't stoop his level of play depending on who it's against. And it's one of the things that gives me the most confidence against Texas Tech is this kid just, not only does he not get rattled, no one's really been able to stop him. Like even Utah, like that was his lowest yardage total of any game, but they literally could not stop him. They tried going under him, they tried going over him, they tried going through him, and Bear found his way into the end zone every single time.
Oh, I felt like, sorry, I do feel like this was a great question, actually, going into Texas Tech. And then Casey, you kind of mentioned maybe some potential limitations in with Bear Bachmeier's like throwing. Like when you look at Texas Tech and you look at, Bear Bachmeier's, whole body of work throughout the season, like where do you feel like he can improve? Like what are his limitations right now that you've seen? You've seen him all the way since, spring ball. What's kind of jumped off the page as something that you would like to see him improve, especially going into as big of a game as this one?
Yeah, I will say, fortunately for those that are watching this podcast, I think Bear showed the most improvement against Iowa State in the area where I wanted him to show the most improvement, which was the ability to sit patiently when you have a clean pocket and let a few guys get open. Bear has been so quick to get rid of the football this season. He's ranked in the top 7 or 8 in terms of average time to throw from start to the Utah game. He's just dropped back, had one read, and delivered the football. And it's actually so interesting thinking back on seeing him in fall camp. The first day, his first practice at BYU, he steps up in front of the media, 3-step drop, hits an RPO post, 3-step drop, hits a quick out, 3-step drop, hits a quick RPO post. And it was like, whoa, true freshmen aren't supposed to be that decisive. And he was. And that translated into the games. But against Iowa State, against a pass rush that wasn't always great, he had a few clean pockets and he patiently sat in there, or he allowed guys like Parker Kingston to get open on that kind of deep out route where he just kind of floated it over to Parker and Parker got a 15 to 20 yard gain. He also calmly stepped up into a few pockets on 3rd and long and delivered strikes. Like it was that kind of putting the ball in Bear Bachmeier's hands on 3rd and long and letting him go get first downs through the air that you hadn't seen this year. And BYU had no other choice against Iowa State. No LJ Martin, so they weren't staying ahead of the sticks like they normally do. And they said, okay, like it's up to Bear Bachmeier to go win us this game, and he did. So for me, now it's, okay, can you do that against the best defense you're going to face in this regular season? Texas Tech is elite. And that's where Bear's ability to make quick decisions could come in very handy this week, because that Texas Tech pass rush is nasty. He's going to have to get rid of the ball quickly. Now, if it was against any other defense, I'd say one area where Bear Bachmeier could get a little bit better is going through that 3rd read. You have seen so many targets to Parker or to Chase or to Carson Ryan. I think there have been moments where Cody Hagan's going to have his day at BYU. He's going to be a really good player. There have been times where Cody Hagan would have been really open and he didn't get to that read. Not necessarily because he made a bad read, but he like the ball that he forced into, I think it was Chase Roberts against Arizona that was intercepted right before halftime. That was a quick 1st or 2nd read that he made. And I don't honestly disagree with it. That cornerback made a fantastic play. But the next read was Cody Hagan, who was wide open for a post route. It's kind of those sorts of things when he does have a clean pocket, going to that 3rd read. And I think that's what we'll see. Probably the next step of Bear Bachmeier, I think that we will see is, number 1, getting to that 3rd read. And number 2 is Bear in high school showed an ability to make some great plays off script. And early on, he hadn't shown that yet. He started to flash it. He flashed it on that kind of corner route to Carson Ryan against Utah. He flashed it when he ran out of the pocket and hit Chase, right on the face mask for that long gain against Iowa State. He's starting to show flashes. And I think what takes Bear Bachmeier to that next level is, okay, you can execute a play from the pocket. Now, when a play breaks down against a defense like Texas Tech, who's going to make plays messy and, not give you a clean pocket, if you can scramble out and create a chunk gain off of that, that could be the difference between BYU only scoring 14 points or getting up to 24 points, which might be enough to win you the game.
To your point, Casey, like his average time to throw, I think he was ranked 7th up until the Utah game in average time to throw. I spoke to a coach about that, and his take was the coach thought that he got rid of the ball too quickly sometimes, that there were throws that, yes, the first read was open, or yes, that first window was open, but if he just held on to it, a split second longer, that receiver would come a little bit more open, or there'd be another guy who comes open on a different route. That was something that this coach wanted to see was, okay, let's see if he can hold on to the ball a little bit longer. And I think we're starting to see that. In the first 6 weeks, he was holding on to the ball for an average of 2.3 seconds. Now, as of today, he's holding on to the ball for 2.54 seconds, which is around 2.5 seconds is exactly the spot I want my quarterback to be. And because of that, like, we're seeing his play elevate where he's just a little bit more comfortable. He's not getting happy feet in the pocket. He's not in a rush, to get the football out. He's sitting there, he's going through his progressions, and he's getting to his second read. And it's kind of tough because I agree with you, Casey, that like I want to see him get to that third read more. The problem is that Parker and Chase just always seem to find a way to get open. And so poor Cody, like Cody gets open a lot too, but it's tough when you got two great route runners in Parker and Chase. But the one spot I really want to see Bear get better is outside the numbers deep passing. This season he's completing, 68% of his passes of 20 yards or more between the numbers. He's got like a 93.9 PFF grade, which is like top 10 in the country. The problem is that he's a combined 2 for 18 on deep throws outside the numbers. Like he just doesn't quite have that touch yet on like a go ball. Not that like you need that, but if he makes a better throw on 4th down to Chase Roberts against Utah, that game gets put out of reach a lot sooner. So like, it's not that I don't think Bear has as many limitations as a passer as the national media would believe. He might have a couple more limitations than BYU fans might think, just because of those outside throws that are really difficult for any quarterback to make, but really that's the only flaw in his game right now, because over the middle of the field, he's darn near completing like 70% of his passes at every single level. So Texas Tech, they're really good. So as of now, like BYU is a 10-point underdog, which is going to come off disrespectful, but I don't think it is. And here's why. Texas Tech is power rated, regardless of what the CFP rankings say, regardless of what the AP rankings say. Texas Tech, in terms of like absolute team strength, is a top 5 team in the country. I think they're like 4th in SP plus, 4th in FPI. These rankings that try and predict like, what is a team going to do? And these kind of metrics is what betting spreads are based on. They all have BYU as a 10-point underdog in this game, not because BYU is a bad football team, but because Texas Tech is just that good. So wanted to get your guys' take on it. Is Texas Tech as good as their metrics or the betting spread might indicate?
I think so. They do everything so well. And as a compliment to BYU, like they're the closest thing that I've seen this year in the Big 12 Conference to BYU. They've got a good quarterback. They've got a good running back, a strong offensive line. Jacob Rodriguez may be the best defensive player in the country. I mean, that dude's a dog. Like he forced fumbles. He had a strip fumble that he took to the house for a touchdown, like a la Tyrann Mathieu is kind of one of the last guys that I've seen kind of, pull that off on a consistent level. They're talented. They've got a highly rated, Cam Miller posted the Big 12 grades for defensive backs. They've got like a top 3 corner. One of the things that I really love about this matchup is while there are top guys that are rated, Jacob Rodriguez, the corner whose name escapes me, so forgive me if there's any Tech fans watching this, but while they have one guy, it feels like at the top of the list, right behind them is like two BYU dudes, right? Evan Johnson's on the list, Trey Alexander's on the list, right? And so it really is going to come down to who is the better team as a whole. And I truly believe that BYU has the talent to compete, which is not like you look at like other top 5 teams that BYU's played. You look at like Oregon or Washington in the past, Wisconsin, and they just get boat raced by these guys because they just don't have the manpower to be able to keep up. Those days are long gone. And they have the talent to be able to go into these types of environments. And Lubbock's going to be crazy. Tortillas or not, it's going to be a wild one there in Lubbock. And BYU's got the horses to compete. It's just, for me, it's going to be team versus team as a whole. BYU has the depth there. And then it's going to be who's coming into this game more mentally prepared. Like, there's going to be guys on both sides that are nervous, and it's going to be who flinches first. Haven't seen BYU flinch yet. Haven't seen Tech flinch much except for against Arizona State. Who blinks first in this game, I think ultimately is going to be the one that takes the L.
Yeah, I look at this game, and when I think about matchups like this, I think what does a blueprint to win look like? For me, the blueprint to win in this game is it's got to be a Jay Hill masterclass. Like, it's got to be one of those games where, Noah Fafita has never thrown 3 interceptions before, except for when he did against BYU. Rocco Becht has never thrown 3 interceptions before, except for when he did against BYU. Like, I'm not saying Baron Morton needs to throw 3 interceptions or else BYU won't win, but I do think that number might be 2. Like, if there is one weakness in Baron Morton's game that he's shown this year, is he will put the ball at risk. Even he'll do it under pressure, but he'll also do it from a clean pocket too. He's ranked 76th in turnover-worthy play rate, and BYU has an interception in every game they've played over the last 2 years, except for Portland State, who didn't know how to throw forward.
The forward pass hadn't made it to Portland yet.
Yeah, exactly. They played like 4 quarterbacks in that game, and none of them knew how to throw. So any team that has attempted to throw consistently against BYU has thrown at least 1 interception. And so that's number 1. Number 2 is BYU gets to be on the opposite side of where they were in their last game. They were playing their fifth game in 5 weeks. Iowa State had the benefit of coming off a bye week, and it showed in that first half. Iowa State smacked BYU in the mouth, and they were just so much more physical, so much more fresh. Iowa State, BYU has not played a more physical defense this year. It's like they play defense in Madden mode where they only tackle with the hit stick. Like, it's out of control how physical they were. And BYU gets to be a little bit on the opposite end of that. They get to go to Lubbock with a week off. Texas Tech is playing their 6th game in 6 weeks. So I am interested to see if BYU can get off to a quick start. Now, Texas Tech has been unbelievable in the first quarter this year. So we'll see. Something's got to give in that department. But I do like BYU's chances to maybe get off to a quick start and hang into that game. And then, like we've talked about, BYU has a play style where they play in close games. Like, BYU's DNA, they have a PhD in winning close games. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coin flip. Just ask Nebraska, who was on the opposite end of that, how hard it can be to win close games. Some teams know how to do it, and some teams don't. Texas Tech has played 1 close game this year, and they lost to Arizona State. BYU has been in 4 or 5 close games, and they've won all of them. To me, the blueprint, you create some turnovers, maybe a short field or 2. You get this game to be around 20 points each around that part, and then you make it an ugly game, and you're the better team in close games. And so that's the blueprint to win. You keep it close, and then you turn on your superpower, which is winning when it matters.
So before the Utah game, it felt like looking at every week, CFP Graphs puts out like their advanced analytics chart, like the comparison between the two teams. And in all of those places, like success rate for Utah, they were in the top 10 in pretty much everything except for rush defense. They were like 38th or something like that. In this game, Texas Tech is similar, where on defense, they're like the fourth best defense in the country in terms of success rate, but they're 27th on offense because they're 31st in dropback, 31st in success rate per rush. BYU has the defense to hold Texas Tech's offense in check. BYU's defense really struggled against Iowa State, stopping the run. BYU's linebackers just haven't really been healthy. They haven't looked like themselves. Isaiah Glasgow has been dealing with an ankle injury since the Arizona game. Jack Kelly has been playing with a dislocated shoulder. Siale Sarah had a stinger in that Iowa State game that pulled him out early. Like, BYU's linebackers just played so poorly against Iowa State. But going back and watching the tape, what Iowa State was doing, like every explosive play that Iowa State had, it was either because they had like 8 offensive linemen in the game to only 7 BYU guys in the box, or we had 2 linebackers in one gap. Like it was really like not like Iowa State was just manhandling our defensive line man for man. It was Iowa State was doing certain things to generate that success, and then on the same side, BYU's defense wasn't playing well. And I think coming off a bye week with that extra little bit of preparation, that little extra time to get healthy, I think we start seeing a BYU defense that looks a little bit more like it did at the beginning of the year. And even against that Utah team, like, BYU was awesome between the tackles in that Utah game. It was the side to side stuff that was a struggle, and Texas Tech, I don't think, can do that in the rush game. So if BYU can stop the run against Texas Tech and force Baron Morton to win this game with his arm, he's going to throw it to BYU. He's going to throw it to BYU at least twice. I don't know if we're going to come down with it, but BYU, like, he had 3 turnover-worthy plays against Kansas State. BYU is going to generate that same amount. Against pressure, Baron Morton is one of the worst quarterbacks in the country, like a 50 PFF grade against pressure. BYU's defensive line is all of a sudden getting tons of pressure. They're top 12 in the country in pressure rate without blitzing this season. So I think BYU's defense is good enough to hold Texas Tech under 28 points. That might be a stretch, but I think they can do it. The question is does BYU have the offense to stack up to such a dominant Texas Tech defense? Which I think, like, getting LJ back helps. Getting back JoJo helps. But what do you guys think?
Well, I think one of the biggest things to help yourself against a defense like Texas Tech is ball security. And it's not just the turnover worthy throws. Like, I would say that I feel comfortable in Bear not putting the ball in harm's way as far as like through the air. This Texas Tech defense is like, when it comes to punching the ball out, like they're Mike Tyson, like they're Rocky Balboa, like Ivan Drago, like throw out any boxer at any point. Like they get a fist on the football and they get the ball out. And I think one of the things that I noticed as I was watching the Kansas State game, as I was watching the Utah game, that's something the players need to be wary of. And I guarantee A-Rod like preaches, Kalani preaches all the time, like not turning the ball over. The biggest thing is not relinquishing any sort of ball security on the football until you hear the whistle. A lot of the turnovers against Utah that they forced and against Kansas State was a player is literally a foot away from getting like downed, and a fist comes in. They've kind of relinquished the play at that point. They feel like the offensive player feels like the play's over. That's when they come in and they knock that ball out. Finishing through the whistle is going to be a huge part of this. This offense can move the football. You're going to have LJ. You're going to have an offensive line that's been getting better each and every week. You've got two of the hottest receivers in the country right now, not even just in the Big 12, in Parker Kingston, obviously, and Chase Roberts. And then you bring back, I don't expect him to play a ton of reps, but you bring back JoJo Phillips as well. They're going to be able to move the football. Just don't hand it over to this defense on your way, and you're going to give yourself a chance to win. One of the questions in the chat was, does BYU need to be +1 or better in the turnover margin to win? I don't think so. I think if it's a negative turnover margin, then yes, we're going to have issues. But I think if it's even or plus, I think you give yourself a great chance.
Yeah, back to Joe's question of, does BYU have the offense to put up enough points to beat this Texas Tech defense? I will say I cannot find a weakness on Texas Tech's defense, and Trevor's point is a great one. I have never seen a defense create fumble takeaways like the Red Raiders do. It's unbelievable. Jacob Rodriguez, it feels like anytime I see him make a tackle, he's punching the ball out, usually successfully, and even if it's not successful, he's pretty close. He just has that NFL linebacker expertise of being able to not only make a tackle and stop a running back in its tracks, but also getting a hand on the football at the same time. So if there's ever a game where BYU needs to protect the football, it's this one. I definitely don't think they would be able to overcome a negative turnover margin. I think, like I said, the blueprint for this game, I think it's got to be BYU +1. Whoever put that question in the chat, I think BYU needs to win the turnover margin to win this game. The Texas Tech defense is so good. I think it would really, really benefit BYU's offense to have a short field or two to work with. So maybe that's a turnover or a great punt return or a kickoff return or something along those lines. But it's just hard for me to foresee a scenario where BYU puts 4 75-yard touchdown drives together against the Red Raiders. There's got to be another way to create points.
Like PFF's top 10 defensive players in the country, Texas Tech has 3 of them. Jacob Rodriguez is number 2, Romello Height, edge rusher, is at 3, and David Bailey is at 7, another edge rusher. Like, there's some dudes. Like, there's going to be first-round picks on this Texas Tech defense that are going to be first-round draft, like that are like the 3rd best player on this defense. Like, it's kind of insane. In terms of like team strength, BYU is pretty much playing Texas A&M this week. Texas Tech would be favored by 3 points over Texas A&M on a neutral field today. So like, think of it in terms of the grandeur of this game and the challenge that BYU is up against. BYU is legitimately playing a top 5 team in the country, and it's because of that defense. So I agree with you, Casey. I think BYU probably needs to be +1 in the turnover margin at least, but I also don't think that's a stretch. Like BYU is +10 in turnover margin. They're 5th in the country in turnover margin this year. It's so like, I think it's reasonable to kind of expect that. But man, like, I think BYU's offense can get 21 points on Texas Tech. I think they're going to need help to get to that 28. And I think 28 is going to need to be that magic number.
Hey, I will say one thing about the Texas Tech defense. In the 2 games that they have either been, they lost to ASU and they were competitive against Utah until the 4th quarter. They have had coverage busts. Against Utah, Devin Dampier missed a wide open wide receiver that would have been a touchdown. And they actually connected on one that was a touchdown, but it was called back from an illegal man being downfield. Against Arizona State, that's how ASU created points as well. Sam Levitt used his superpowers to evade pressure, and he chucked a few balls deep. But I think there are going to be opportunities for Bear in this game to create really influential chunk plays. Like I said, I don't think this is a game where you have multiple 12-play touchdown drives. Texas Tech is way too good at getting you behind the sticks to do that consistently. I think you're going to have to create A-Rod's going to have to dial up some of his one-play touchdowns that we've seen, against like the one he opened up against ECU on a long ball to Parker. that one that was intended for Parker Kingston against Utah that was just dropped. I think based on the angle I had of that one, I think that could have been a one-play touchdown had Bear seen him a little bit earlier. It's plays like that. I think you're looking at 30, 40, 50 plus yard plays that will have to sustain the BYU offense instead of the, keeping it at 3rd and 2.
This is the biggest BYU football game since when?
Ever. Minus national championship, I guess.
I think given how we started and the implications of this, like you're talking about 2 potential playoff teams, like all these important games in BYU history have never come with the implications that this one does. And I think that's why you can make an argument for it. Like this game gets you in the college football playoff very likely. And I don't think we've been able to say that about another game in BYU history where you could stamp your spot with a win. Even if you were to drop one down the stretch, this win would sustain you and get you in.
This is the only top 10 matchup in BYU football history. Like that feels crazy. Granted, BYU was playing in the WAC for a lot of those years, so not a lot of top 10 teams there. But the fact that, like, again, College Game Day is going to be here. Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit are going to be on the call. ABC, again, top 10 matchup, which is essentially a college football playoff play-in game. It's outside of that 84 Holiday Bowl, this is probably the biggest game in BYU history, which is exciting. So like to the point about slow starts, like no, BYU cannot afford a slow start. If you can't get up for this, I know it's at 11 a.m., but if you can't get up for this game, you don't have a pulse. Like this, when BYU got invited to the Big 12, this was the moment that we were dreaming about. And it's crazy that it's come in just in year 3 that we're kind of living in this reality. But I mean, if BYU pulls off this win, it's the biggest win since BYU beat Miami in 1990 in terms of like implication and quality. Because that game won Ty Detmer the Heisman Trophy, and Miami went on to finish like number 2 in the country that year. This is about as awesome of a win as BYU would ever have if they can pull this off. And I think they can. It's a narrow path to get there, but the good news is like BYU has already beaten a top 6 caliber team in Utah like 2 weeks ago. So like we've seen them do it. Like I think that Texas Tech is the better football team, but I also think the metrics haven't caught up to BYU just yet. So let's get into predictions. These predictions are presented by Wilner O'Reilly Immigration Law. When it comes to immigration, you want lawyers you can trust. Wilner O'Reilly brings 26 years of experience, including a former immigration officer on the team. They represent actors, professional athletes, Fortune 500 companies, and families, ensuring that everyone has access to top 10 legal support. They speak 10 languages, including Spanish, and despite what you see on TV or social media, they're achieving great results every single day. As the listener to the Hype Train podcast, your consultation is completely free. Visit Wilner O'Reilly in the link and mention the Hype Train to get started.
But before we start, Joe, if I can, just quick shout out to Cougar Nation and Red Raider Nation for everything that I've seen on Twitter today regarding Maddie and Ivan Ortiz. I'm sure everybody in here is like familiar with what's been going on, but Ivan Ortiz, team barber for Texas Tech, his wife was hit by a drunk driver. And there's been a GoFundMe set up. The goal, I believe, was like $25K. It's been making the rounds on Twitter. And last I saw it, it was $46K. I would imagine at this point, it's probably north of 50. Kirk Herbstreit stepped in, donated $5K of his own money. So shout out. Kirk will be on the call on Saturday. But you guys at Cougar Nation, especially since we have some of y'all live here, you guys are awesome. Like the as big as this game is, we were just talking about it, comparing to Michigan for the national championship and Miami in 1990. All these things pale in comparison to, loved ones getting hurt by bad decisions. And so the fact that you guys stepped up to help kind of ease all that, I think is amazing. So go Cougs. And like you said, Joe, let's get to the predictions.
I think if there was ever a game where I was going to pick BYU to lose on this podcast, this would probably be it. But you know me better than that. There's absolutely no chance. I am going to say BYU wins this game 28-24 because BYU gets a defensive or special teams touchdown. I think that, one of the big advantages BYU has in this game is they're 6th in the country in special teams SP plus. Texas Tech is ranked 80th in the country in special teams SPF or SP plus. So I think there's going to be, for BYU to win, there's going to be some big defensive or special teams play that kind of swings the momentum in BYU's favor. My hot take is that we are going to hear at least one Chris Fowler, Kingston in the clear. Will they catch him? No.
It's a good one.
That is going to sustain me for a generation if I hear that on Saturday.
I think, Joe, you nailed it on the head. I think 28 is the magic number, and I think it's going to be the magic number by exactly 1 point. I'm going to say BYU 28 to Texas Tech's 27. And in order to beat a defense as good as Texas Tech, you're going to have to beat what they've been doing all year. So my prediction is specifically BYU no fumbles lost. There may be a ball put on the ground, but I'm going to say BYU, whether they put the ball on the ground or not, they will not be turning the ball over that way.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks again for having me on. I've given many predictions on the internet before. It's never been in a sponsored segment, though. So this is truly an honor. I think, man, like Joe said, I haven't fully cemented my prediction yet for this week, but I can't be on the Hype Train podcast and predict a BYU loss. That just doesn't seem correct. So
You'd never be invited back.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I can't.
If you want to be up for guest of the year,
that's right. I can't. Yeah, I can't. I can't have my reputation tarnished like that on the Hype Train podcast. I'm going to stick with what I said earlier. I think if BYU wins this game, it's a Jay Hill masterclass game. I think a path to a BYU win looks an awful lot like the Utah-Texas Tech game, except BYU doesn't commit the turnovers that Utah did and doesn't allow things to unravel in the fourth quarter. Before Baron Morton leaves that game with an injury, Texas Tech had, I think, 10 points. So I think a BYU win would look something like 23-21. I don't know that you need to get more than 24 points to win this game.
I love that. Carter Anderson pointed it out. He's absolutely right. Pretty sure that we're 19-2 in predictions over the last 2 years. So that's great news for us.
Well, I forgot the bold part. Let me come up with something bold. I think so. I predicted 23-21. I will say that 23 comes on a walk-off Will Ferrin field goal. How about that?
Let's go. He's
like
back. Again, we've been saying it all season. At some point, you got to think BYU is going to lose a football game. But again, Taylor Puffer pointed it out in the chat, but not this day. They're going to lose at some point, just not Saturday. It's. I don't know how. I don't know when. Or again, this one's going to be tough sledding for BYU, but I don't. The football gods owe us one for that ball bouncing off Jacob Robinson's helmet last year against Kansas. BYU is pulling off their biggest win in 30 years on Saturday. Let's get it.
Is that your second prediction? Is a Bear Bachmeier pooch punt off of a defensive
Absolutely.
player?
I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, and I actually really like Texas Tech, so I'm not wishing that on them.
Hey, I will say one thing that we learned last year about the Big 12. When you're at the top of the standings, especially when you haven't been there over and over, it gets super hard to win games in November. I think we saw that with Houston last week, a little bit of Cincinnati. Texas Tech has to deal with what BYU had to deal with last year, the pressure of being on top for the first time in a really, really long time. There's so much hype around this game. And I think to a certain extent, not having game day on your own campus, not having they can't go to class without seeing students camping out for this game. Like, I do wonder if there's a little bit of an advantage for BYU in this game because of Texas Tech is in the middle of all of it. And they haven't had a team this good since Michael Crabtree was on the roster. And everything is riding on this game for them because this would be their second loss, whereas BYU has wiggle room a little bit like we talked about earlier. So I do wonder if that could come into play, maybe not in this game, but I think we'll see it in this conference in November, whether it's Cincinnati, who's there for the first time, or someone like Texas Tech on Saturday. I do think that's going to play a role.
It is interesting that I honestly, speaking of trains, I totally lost my train of thought. So that's embarrassing. Yeah, it's just one of those games where really the only thing that BYU has to lose in this game is cushion. Like if BYU loses this game, you got to win out, but you're favored in all those games anyway. Like this is probably the first game of the season where BYU truly gets to go out and play like there's nothing to lose. And I think they're going to shock the world, man. Like this team is so much more talented than the average national person thinks. They got the dudes on defense to keep this Texas Tech offense in check. I think BYU's defense is every bit as good as a Utah defense that held Baron Morton to 10 points on that field. And honestly, I think the offense is a lot. The numbers haven't caught up to BYU's offense either because, again, Bear just continues to get better and better and better every week. And we're going to learn that the best Bear on the field between Barron and Bear Bachmeier is our guy.
Cougs by a billion.
Cougs by a billion. Let's go.